I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, questions surrounding what's known as the Claims Conference, the nonprofit organization established in 1952 in cooperation with the government of West Germany, with the mission of enacting laws that would financially compensate victims of the Holocaust. Agreements were also signed with Israel so that three bodies, the Claims Conference, West Germany, and Israel, would all be engaged in providing financial relief, rehabilitation, and resettlement of Jewish victims of Nazi persecution. The formal name of the Claims Conference is the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. Sadly, however, the Claims Conference has been living under a black cloud for many years now, with charges that more than $57 million have either been misappropriated or actually stolen by employees of the Claims Conference. And so a watchdog ombudsman was hired by the Claims Conference to do a thorough and impartial investigation of the charges. And a most distinguished individual named Shmuel Hollander, an Israeli with a long and impressive record of public service in the state of Israel at the highest levels, a man of impeccable credentials of integrity and intelligence, was hired by the Claims Conference as its ombudsman. After a serious investigation, Shmuel Hollander published a report confirming serious violations by employees of the Claims Conference and actually suggested that more than $100 million may have been misappropriated or stolen. And a short time ago, at the end of June, Shmuel Hollander's contract with the Claims Conference was not renewed. So what does it all mean? Is the Claims Conference the organization established to provide financial and material aid and sustenance to Holocaust survivors and to their families, some of whom are in desperate need of financial support and assistance? Is the Claims Conference guilty of stealing from Holocaust survivors? Are the various charges against the Claims Conference true? Well, one individual has been at the forefront of trying to bring issues regarding the Claims Conference to light. He is a man with a long and most impressive record himself of public service to the Jewish world for more than 40 years. He's now the brilliant columnist whose pieces appear weekly in the Jerusalem Post and which can be read online. In fact, you can receive his weekly email columns on your own computer. Isi Leibler, who's on the phone right now, Skyping with us from Jerusalem. Isi, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure to be with you.
Okay, Isi, you wrote a piece recently entitled Explosive New Claims Conference Scandals Revealed. In it, you wrote about a smoking gun exposed by Shmuel Hollander. Take a moment to give us the summary of what you tried to say in your recent piece.
In a nutshell, Shmuel Hollander has kind of not confirmed, but substantially exceeded some of the grave reservations I had about the Claims Conference, and what he has spoken and said, I believe, requires drastic and immediate action. Mm-hmm. He has confirmed that there have been cover-ups. He has confirmed there's been incompetence, and he has demonstrated the way they treated him, that they are determined to prevent the public and their own directors from knowing the truth. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, you mentioned $100 million. Instead, there was $57 million was announced. We don't know what the actual amount was, and he himself has merely said it was well in excess of that. I have heard from individual directors that it would be in the vicinity of $100 million, and I believe that to be true.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I mentioned who Hollander is. Would you also amplify what is his background that makes him such an impressive ombudsman in this instance?
He has been the special advisor, in the sense, the key civil servant, the central civil servant for 6 successive Israeli prime ministers. He's a man of impeccable credentials. He's a consummate public servant. Look, his word is gold. And when he says that he was not prepared to be used as a fig leaf and that he was dismissed because he was telling the truth and trying to make reforms, nobody is going to challenge that because he's a man of honor and dignity and he would not tell a lie.
Okay. I want the audience to understand that Shmuel Hollander's report is public. You can get it online. And in essence, what Isi writes about in his piece, all of it is documented online. You can read any of it and all of it. And the question for you, Isi, is, and I want to remind our audience, you've been at this for a long, long time. In fact, one of the earliest conversations you participated in on what was then Shalom TV, JBS,
Yes,
was with Samuel Norwich, who is the publisher of The Forward. He was involved in the Claims Conference. And on L'chaim, you and Sam sat together and you sort of prodded him, saying that the Claims Conference was guilty of something, and it's not clear at all times whether it is simply mismanagement or whether there is some real corruption and theft going on. But my point is, this is something you've been hammering at for a long, long time. Where do you feel things stand now as you look at the arc of the charges against the Claims Conference? How do you view it today?
Look, when a man like Hollander says that it's only the tip of the iceberg what we've seen, when he analyzes and exposes terrible things that have taken place there, mismanagement, lack of governance, cover-ups, and, well, malpractices, I would say malpractices. I think that this is the beginning of the end, and I know that there are bodies like the World Jewish Congress and the Jewish Agency that 2 years ago tried to bring about reforms that were overwhelmed because the directors there, many of them are ad hoc people appointed by him. Others are people with conflict of interest. The whole board has failed. Now, I believe they have no choice because if they don't act rapidly, there will be, God forbid, external intervention by either the Germans, which would be a great disgrace, or the New York Attorney General, who I know many people have been turning to. Now, if that happens, it will be a disgrace for the Jewish people, but they will have brought it upon themselves. And all I know is my main concern is how the last remnants of survivors, those people who are living under abject circumstances, those people who are poverty-stricken and are not receiving enough to sustain themselves, the fact that they have not been prioritized and that they are not being looked after the way they should be, that is the number one priority. And I believe what is needed is a complete restructuring of that organization, an independent board, and I think that you will find that Hollander knows what he's talking about and that people will listen to him. They heard what I said. I've had enormous public support from the people below, but the people above, the people representing organizations, have now got a fiduciary responsibility to act. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves in great trouble. They have the fact that the man was sacked and that Julius Berman actually told him, you were being sacked because you caused trouble by your reports. He didn't do this immediately, because immediately after the report was issued, he was assured that he could continue working quietly and reform from within. But as you can see from his letter, he was forestalled at every level by the chief executive, the executive director, Greg Schneider, who denied him access and broke all the rules and regulations that are required, that are associated with an ombudsman. And he is a very angry man. He's a man who's rarely angry because he's known in Israel to have been, as I said, a consummate public servant who does what has to be done, is quiet, and has no axe politically to grind. But now he feels himself being a child of Holocaust. He could have been a major diplomat overseas. He chose this job as ombudsman because he felt that he wanted to serve the Jewish people in a way which was associated with the fact that he was a child of Holocaust survivors. He's a very angry and distressed man.
Yes.
And he feels he has a mission. And I'm sure that people are going to listen to him.
Mm-hmm. By the way, do you know...
To me, as a columnist, he is someone nobody can challenge him.
Yes. By the way, Isi, do you know him personally, Shmuel Hollander?
I did not know him, but I have met him since. I've spoken to him since, and I found him an extraordinarily quiet, gentle person, and I'm amazed that he's so angry. But he's angry not because of his own personal circumstances. He's angry because he feels that he was misled. He thought he could do some reforms from internally. They promised him he would have a free hand, and he was denied that and sacked when they thought they could get away with it. The arrogance and the stupidity of them not allowing this man to clean the place up when he could have done it quietly. Now it's going to be a big scandal. They have an annual conference in 10 days. My prediction is that there's going to be a dramatic change and revolution. I hope it's not going to be done by external forces, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they brought this upon themselves. And they've lied. He shows and demonstrates lies. He was told things that were not true. I mean, there are certain proprieties that a charity organization has to uphold. They have Mr. Julius, Rabbi Berman.
Yes, but we should identify, Isi, that Julius Berman, Rabbi Julius Berman, is the president of the Plains Conference.
By the way, he was a chairman. He was chairman for 11 years. In order to ensure that he can stay longer, he changed his title to president so he could stay on forever. But anyway, he is the president, and the executive director is Greg Schneider, and those two people have been acting as though the Claims Conference was their own personal fiefdom. They have simply ignored all governance. They have not kept their directors informed. Many of the directors are confused. Many of the directors are misled. And many of them have a conflict of interest because they're getting various things for their own organizations. They don't want to stand up and be counted. What's needed is a really independent organization to act as independent directors. That is not the case now.
Yes. Incidentally, Isi, you have a long history. You were a leader in Australian Jewry for many years. You were one of the instrumental individuals at the very beginning of the Soviet Jewry movement. You see how life works. It almost never works that an organization can investigate itself. So
absolutely.
Correct?
Absolutely. This is a crime. They have refused to have an independent investigation. They have refused. They have fought bitterly. Everything has been internal audits. And when they had their own ombudsman look at them, they didn't like what he said. So there was an intervention, and that was smashed, and he was told, you'll do it quietly within. But he wasn't able to do it quietly within. And I think it is the biggest scandal because this is an organization dealing with sacred funds.
Yes.
For restitution. There are billions and billions of dollars at stake. The corruption has only started in the last 10 years. And all I can say to you is it's a question of power. Power corrupts, and power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There have been no checks and balances, and these people have had a free hand, and they've misled their stupid and foolish board and their directors who are responsible because they just were unable to cope. But that's not an excuse. They are there on that board, and they have to act now. And if they don't act now, they will find that they will face terrible consequences. And the Jewish community will be shamed.
Yes.
I would rather see the Jewish community shamed and the Holocaust survivors looked after than allow this terrible travesty to go on indefinitely.
Yes.
It's got to come to a stop.
Yes. By the way, it's obvious Holocaust survivors who are still living are very old, tend to be very old.
Yes.
And many of them are in serious need. Somebody who has been on and is a wonderful friend, and you know her very well, Dr. Naomi Vilko, who is the child of survivors, and her mother is a survivor. And she's also been trying for many years to bring some of the issues that she feels are endemic to the Claims Conference to light. And she feels that there are survivors who are simply not being taken care of the way the Claims Conference was supposed to take care of people. And then you come along, and again, you have been one of those in the forefront of trying to expose light on what is a noble, noble cause in the Jewish world. And every one of us would like to see, it's not simply compensation. What we want is really any survivor to have a life of dignity, and if there is a way to get funds to survivors that enable them to live a more comfortable life, especially as they do face the problems of older age, we all want that to happen. Now, one of the things you have also said is that you're very critical of the leadership, and you've mentioned Julius Berman. I want to make sure the audience understands. Shmuel Hollander's letter is public record. You can read it online. But Julius Berman,
it's not public record, but it's been leaked. He didn't send it on. He sent it to all the members of the board, and a board member leaked it, and it's public. It's on public record now.
Okay. In addition, Julius Berman wrote a letter as well, and I want you to comment on Julius Berman's claim, because Julius Berman says the following: Shmuel Hollander had a contract with the Claims Conference that expired 6 months before it expired. 6 months before it expired, Hollander publishes his report, which is pretty dramatic. But 6 months after that report was published, Hollander's contract was renewed. And Berman writes in his open letter, why does anyone claim that we are in some way trying to get rid of Hollander inappropriately because he wrote this report when we confirmed his new contract 6 months after he wrote and published the initial report? So Berman's claim is they did not renew Hollander's contract, but it had nothing to do with the letter. What do you say? I'm sorry, nothing to do with the report. What do you say?
They're trying to besmirch him as a disgruntled person who's just crying because it was dismissed. That is not the case. They could not sack him 6 months later because even they realized that would have caused an explosion, having regard to the report that he'd written. So they let him go for 6 months. They announced to him and promised him he would have a chance to reform things internally and be given a free hand. And that was not the case. On the contrary, he writes in his letter that Schneider even denied him access, and he was unable to get access to files and all the things that an ombudsman is entitled to. So when Berman at the end comes up and explicitly says to him, he explicitly told him, I'm sacking you because of the troubles you did then. He said it. I believe him because he's not. The one thing nobody's going to say about Shmuel Hollander is that he would tell a lie like that. I believe him implicitly. So I'm saying this is all nonsense. Now they're going to try and besmirch him in any way possible, and they contradict themselves. Some of them say, well, it was a question of economy. We want to save money, which is laughable when you look at the money they spend on public relations. And if that was the case, they could have told him, go half-time, whatever it is. They were determined to get rid of him because they knew he was a nuisance. He would continue probing and asking questions. And he asked very difficult questions, and the questions are not answerable. And I believe that there's a lot more that he hasn't told me and hasn't told the public that he knows. And I believe that if there is an investigation, it will be terrible because there have been shocking things. Look, I can go back to the beginning when I started. March of the Living, $500,000 went down the tubes. We never got an explanation of what happened there. And there are a series of other things like that. Mm-hmm. Now, the fact that $57 million may have gone to $100 million, it's certainly substantially far beyond that. Nobody's been told about it. Nobody's accountable. Nobody says anything. They pat themselves on the back that they're great people because they discovered it after 15 years of this operating under their very noses. This is despicable. There's no accountability. No organization, charitable or commercial, would tolerate a situation where there was no accountability for such a gigantic loss. And I think it's a scandal for the Jewish people, and there has to be intervention. Okay. There will be intervention if it's not going to be done by the people themselves.
Okay. Has the German government responded in any way?
Well, one can see that they use the German government, They wrote a letter to the German government. They're not prepared to show people, which was obviously not correct. He was told, the German government asked for certain assurances and guarantees, and subsequently that was proven to be false. The German government has not intervened at this stage, and I can understand the German government being concerned and not particularly desirous of getting involved in a Jewish upheaval of this sort. But, the German taxpayers' monies, and you have to have respect for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Now
I would think it would be terrible if they got involved.
Yes.
I mean, for them to have to clean up a Jewish organization dealing with restitution funds, to me, it'd be a chilul Hashem.
Mm-hmm. Now
they bring it upon themselves.
You've alluded to this already, but I want you to speak to it one more moment. In any state where a nonprofit is registered, it is regulated by the Attorney General of that state. So the Attorney General for the state of New York would be monitoring the claims conference. Do you know of any action or any investigation currently being done by the Attorney General of the state of New York?
Not at this stage, but I'm sure that they've been bombarded by people asking to do that. And I see certain parallels with the World Jewish Congress when I was involved in, and I was a whistleblower there, and I was vindicated. The New York Attorney General had to intervene and intervened, and the order was brought about. I hope that doesn't happen with the claims conference, but if it does, they will have brought it upon themselves.
Mm-hmm. You've talked about how angry Shmuel Hollander is. You're angry too, are you not?
I'm outraged. I'm distressed, because to me, this is something central to the Jewish people. In a sense, the most important organization in the world, because it's dealing with sacred funds, and you've got people out there starving whilst they're going into projects which are quite good. But I don't believe that Limud or Taglit or any of these other programs, which are very, very good programs, should be somehow or other prioritized as long as there are Holocaust survivors who are starving in their last elderly days. It's the Holocaust survivors that I'm particularly distressed about. And as you said before, there's only a few years left for them. Let's let them have their twilight years in dignity. We owe that to them. And that's what these reparations and restitution is supposed to be about. And there's been no attempt to really review the whole situation and see that it can be changed around so that priority can be given to them. I believe everything should be frozen. They should be given the priority above everybody else.
Now, Isi, you have had throughout your career moments when you've stood up to power. But the claims conference, I understand, is very powerful in the Jewish community and has influential people involved and has support in many places inside the Jewish community. And when one goes against the claims conference, one is going against a very powerful organization. I want to know, are you in any way afraid of the claims conference and any kind of reprisals they might try to take against you?
No, I would invite them, if they felt that I was telling any lies, to sue me for libel. And I say that as a challenge, because I know that everything I've written has been truthful and that they would not hesitate to sue me if they didn't know I was not telling the truth. And I believe that the World Jewish Congress and the Jewish Agency and a number of other organizations that tried to bring about changes will enforce those changes now. And if they don't enforce them, if they can't get the other board of directors to go along with them, they will be forcing intervention from external sources. The days of these, the days of this fiefdom are coming to a close, and they went too far with Hollander. They cannot make a fig leaf of a man like Hollander. That's the expression he used, and I understand it.
Okay. Last point. What would you have our viewers either do, think, at the moment? I'll stay with the do. Is there anything you would like to see, those who are watching you now all over America, Jew and non-Jew alike, is there something you could suggest? Either, again, is there an attitude you want us to adopt? Is there any action you're asking us to be involved in?
Well, they should certainly bombard the claims conference and let them know what they feel. And my view is, if they see after a period of time that there is no action being taken, they should call on law enforcement people to intervene if that's necessary. I pray that that is not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Isi, you know how much I love you, how much I think of you. Your writing is spectacular. I look forward to it every week. I hope anybody who watches JBS, if they haven't yet signed up to receive your weekly email, and sometimes it's even more than once a week, Isi, they should do so. You are an extraordinary voice of conscience and insight coming out of Jerusalem. And you know how much I appreciate all the time and energy and kindness you've shown to me and to JBS. Thank you so much for, again, just spending some time trying to clarify what is clearly a most important, pressing issue on the Jewish scene today. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate those comments very much.
Be well.
All the best.
My conversation with Isi Leibler, Jerusalem Post columnist and a man who's devoted his life to the well-being of the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and who's been a most courageous voice with regard to taking on the Claims Conference. And this is a story of real significance, real importance to the Jewish community. And JBS will continue to stay on top of it, and will continue to let you know what's going on. And I hope that all of you are now more aware of and sensitive to this very serious problem, because it affects survivors and their family. And for all the talk, there's so much talk everywhere, not only in the Jewish world, but it's easy to talk. The Claims Conference was created to provide real financial assistance and well-being and rehabilitation to families which needed it at their core. And we hope that ultimately, whatever, quote, scandal, unquote, surrounds the Claims Conference, it will be resolved in the very near future. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, JBS associate producer, Dara Golub, and our producer for this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.